Hey there, Outliers. Niiamah Shang here. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of your journey here today. We are here on the Outliers at the Roundtable, and I'm going to be spending time with Marissa today to just really dive into what really actually flows out. Right before we came out to this and hit record, we spent a minute here just like actually opening up our channels and really becoming present once again. And so we're going to be able to, I like to make sure that that comes into this conversation. So you get to see like this is actually the birthed from that experience and what it ends up coming when you're able to just be here in the moment. So Marissa, I'm glad that we get to spend time together. Thanks so much for making time for this here. And also thanks for uh one, slowing us down, and two, asking for what it is that you want. That is something that I look at it. I'm like, all right, this becomes a lot easier when I know that everyone's in ownership of their experience. So thank you so much.
Oh gosh, thank you for that. Yeah, and thank you for providing such a welcoming and opening space to allow me to express what I need and what I want. That was really a beautiful exchange we had at the beginning. So, would you like to do this for your listeners? Would you like to do a minute of stillness and offer them what it's like to start with stillness
Let's
and
do it.
then take action? Okay, that sounds great. So, I'm going to set my timer here. And what I'll do, everybody, is I will just be guiding you through with some prompts and ideas to kind of keep your focus on being in the present moment. So here we go, 1 minute. So if you'd like to, you can close your eyes or soften your gaze in front of you. And let's just all invite everyone to take a deep breath in and extend your exhale. And come back to your normal breath and just notice the qualities of your breath. No judgment, nothing to change, nothing to do. Just simply be. And then begin to notice where your body is in space. Maybe you're sitting on a support. Maybe you are standing, maybe in your kitchen, somewhere through your day. Noticing your feet on the ground, how they feel with the contact of that surface. And that is 1 minute. It goes so fast. It goes so fast. So that's a wonderful place to begin, beginning from stillness.
So Marissa, I would love for you to share. Firstly, thank you. Thank you
You're
here.
welcome.
Um, some of the experience that I got from that was a an invitation to self on uh how I want to play or like how do I want to play in this space. I still feel that the podcast itself is still evolving. I just got done talking to someone who is an artist, and they described even after the years of doing art, all their artistry, they're like, I'm still like learning my art, I'm still learning me and I'm learning my art. And so I realized like this podcast is part of that. And there was something in there where I was like, oh, what if people just came and did their practices here and we got a chance to showcase that as well. So thanks. It was an unexpected, unplanned, and and very useful uh component of this. So thank you here.
You're so welcome. Yeah.
Yeah. So Marissa, I would love for people to get to know you. Mind sharing more about you and the game that you play?
Sure. Yeah. Um, let's see now. I want to just qualify that I like the word play. I'm not so keen on the word game. I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love playfulness and I love playing. And I believe that when we invite stillness, we can get to creativity, like the way you described with the podcast or with the artist that you spoke to. So I really love that idea. And so, how my life has played out has been uh, something, as we all experience in each of our individual lives. So, I'll just start with my childhood was incredibly difficult with a tremendous amount of trauma. tremendous amount of lack of safety. I would even go so far as to say very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like qualified, like conditional love instead of unconditional love, right? So what is the opposite of unconditional love? It's conditional love. And the love of the adults that were around me when I was young was very conditional. And that was incredibly difficult to bear. So then as I survived that and got into adulthood, I began to realize that I had certain maybe struggles or challenges that others did not seem to have. And that really manifested in things like my relationships, both my personal relationships and my business relationships. It manifested in my ability to be within a group or a team versus my desire or need to be an individual. And there were a lot of struggles with that. I struggled with, being successful at various jobs or career paths as a result of that. And what I came to realize is, just like you said, I have a personal ownership and responsibility to deal with that in my own life. And also, some of the work environments that I was part of were really not open to meeting someone like me even halfway with a sense of camaraderie or wanting to develop me personally so that I could be a better worker for them, right? Um, I really felt a lack of that. And most of the work environments I've been in through my life have been very much about like command and control. Like we must control your emotional challenges or your teamwork challenges instead of like, oh, how do we foster you to get better? How do we help you grow? Instead of we must control you and have you be like the way we want you to be. And it doesn't work. Like it didn't work with me. It doesn't work with a lot of people. And so what I came to, like we talked about the other day, is this idea that there are a lot of incredibly skillful, amazing, dynamic people out in the world who may or may not have a background of trauma, but whatever it is that was in their experiences, it has led them to a place where they may have struggles like this too. And how can we meet them, hear them, see them, honor them, and allow them to become part of a positive working environment without it having to be exclusive? So I think that's really kind of the gist of the answer to your question.
Yeah, so I love this component here of bringing really like creating the space for different ways of approaching things to also be able to be nurtured and nourished and to be contributed. It's actually really interesting to me, Marissa, because if we look at this here, like the way that we started out this conversation is very much in that vein, right? Rather than holding on to, well, this is what we do here, you were able to offer something and then it was able to be met and we were able to co-create something that hadn't been it's never happened on this podcast at least, right? And so I'm excited to see outliers coming back and be like, that was great. We should do a grounding exercise every time we come on, you know?
Nice.
But that was something that if I'm hearing from you, like one, your experience in life and your experience like as a professional, but also like in what has worked for you was one of the reasons why you developed like the skill to facilitate that and also the skill to request for it. And as a result of it, this is something that if we were trying to be controlling of how this would go, we would have missed out on, even though it's been a really wonderful and beneficial thing so far. What are your thoughts on that? And what's your heart telling you on that?
Oh gosh, I resonate so much with what you just said. And I think it's really important to point out to the listeners part of the conversation that we had right before we hit the record button, which was not only that minute of stillness that you and I did without recording it. However, it was me saying to you, I'm feeling nervous about having so many constraints put onto our conversation. I would like to just open up to the flow and see where we go. Can we do this? And you said, yeah, let's do it. And so, because I presented this new idea, but you also being open to that idea was the key, right? So, there was an interchange between the two of us. So, there was an openness by you to be willing to try something new and different. And then there was courage on the part of me to say, I'm feeling uncomfortable. I would like to name that and suggest an alternative. So there was an interplay there. That was the play part, right?
I think this is really wonderful here because, uh, on my end, there was a bunch of different thoughts that happened in my mind, like immediately. My mouth said, yes, let's go in. And then my brain was thinking, oh, am I not leading? Is this the way it's supposed to go? So on and so forth. And I like to like pull all that in because the end result is the conversation we're having, right? It's like the mid result. We're still in the middle of the conversation, right? Um, and yet at the same time, like I think there's a part of me that doesn't want to say like it isn't necessarily easy, but it's still like it's still good. There's still like I'm so grateful for it. I was sitting there, I was like, oh, I'm really grateful for you, Marissa, because you've given me a chance to have this experience. Like to hear my thoughts, right? And to see where my thoughts were going and to feel that like I'm like, where am I feeling resistance? What am I thinking about next? Like all these things were happening inside, even though we were also doing the exercise in the midst. And I think that that's something that I want to voice because it ends up playing. I think it gives us a chance to see like more of the 360 degree. You were vulnerable and saying like and courageous and asking for what you wanted. And interestingly enough, there was some courage happening. There was some vulnerability. I don't know if it was courage or not, but there was some vulnerability happening inside of me where I'm like, what is going on? This is interesting. Why am I feeling this? And thank you, Marissa, for giving me a new sensation because most of the time I can hit record and just kind of go just get through. It's not like
Sure.
actually how it feels, but like, this is something I was like, oh, something's been stirred up in here.
Yeah. Oh gosh, thank you so much for saying that because I was preparing a few notes. So I want you to know I do prepare
Yeah,
for
yeah,
things
we do.
like this, and yet it's a dance, right,
Yeah,
between preparation and space.
yeah.
And so the thing I circled was self-awareness. So it's really critical what you are saying about how you got in touch with your own bravery to say yes, even though you're like, I have no idea what's going to happen next, but you said yes. And then also the vulnerability that you felt in saying that yes to something new. So that was another point of self-awareness. And then you noticed your thought patterns through that point of stillness. So for me personally, I have complex PTSD due to childhood trauma. I'm not the only one. There are people all around the world who have this, right? And there are phenomenal workers all around the world who have this, who struggle to be in the workplace because of it. So when we can all collectively, without having to point out or say you have to do this, but when we can all join in and say, let's become more self-aware. Let's become aware of each of us individually, but we do it as a group so that we can learn and grow together and yet still take personal responsibility. There's that dance, right, between the two. So there's so many concepts. So this is why I'm approaching this concept of leadership with both trauma-informed and yoga philosophy practices, because everything about what I have done in my yoga and meditation practice, which I've been doing now for over 20 years, has allowed me to even get to this point, to be vulnerable with you, to open up the opportunity to be vulnerable together and to share that with your audience and invite them to give it a try and to see what it might be like and how transformative it might be for them. So there's one point I want to bring in here along with the self-awareness, and that's this concept of in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, which were written around 200 BC, what most scholars agree on, there's a concept in the second sutra that talks about stira. These are Sanskrit words, stira, which is structure or steadfastness, and then sukham, which is sweetness and sweet space. And so when you think about what we just created just right now, spontaneously in this moment, is we had some structure, right? There's a recording, there's a time we met, we talked a little bit before we started, all those things. And then we invited in that sweet space. And so we had both. There was vulnerability and courage from you. There was vulnerability and courage from me. And then we put them together and we created a structure, which was 1 minute of stillness. That was the structure part. But in that stillness, all this sweet space was cultivated. And you got to learn and grow. I got to learn and grow, right? So when we talk about leadership concepts, this is what I am hoping to bring into the world. This is the change making that I'm hoping to accomplish with others, is to help people understand that being a leader means taking very seriously our personal responsibility to understand how we operate, because that's the way we can then empathically connect to others and help them to grow too, and help see where they're struggling and say, here, let me help you along if you are willing, and to provide that service, right, as a leader. So sometimes it takes being steadfast, and sometimes it takes being sweet. And the only way we're going to know which one to employ at any given time is if we know ourselves. So that's what I would like to share in response to what you stated.
Marissa, I like to stay with this for a bit longer. You good with it?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah, let's do
cool.
it.
Yeah. I like uh keep note here, right? So we're gonna have a like there's a bit of this is a bit meta where we're having a conversation about the conversation, and yet that like to me, this is one of the most fun that I can have because it's not what we do, but how we do it. That is one of the underlying components of everything that I stand for. So I'm really grateful for this. A few things that came up here, Marissa, as you're saying, one of them was the alignment I felt in what you were saying, and there was one part inside of me where I had like a little bit of a jar, right? It happened twice, and it was like right after each other, which was this is what I'm hoping to do. And I'm like, and that jar like threw me off because I was like, well, you just did it. Like this is what's happening, right? And not only on like like behind the scenes part, but then we came into the conversation and you're like, well, why don't we gift this to outliers here today? Right. And so there's like for me, I'm very much like I hold you as one who does this. This is what you do. It comes into space with you. And then when it's not present, it becomes present because you are present. So that part, like that felt real when I came there. I was like, this is not a future, it's not a future element. This is here right now. And we just got to continue to expand on that because it's you, Marissa. That's what I'm getting. So that was one.
Thank you for that. That feels,
Yeah.
thank you.
And I want to also thank you and just like acknowledge this other component here of you created this as an experience. And I think that like when I think about different outliers and like as we're trying to like figure out our own leadership and how we bring things out into the world, like you didn't do a thing where you just talked about the potential benefits of something or the things that you do with your clients. Like we got an experience and it was the structure was there for like the 1 minute, we had a bit of it. It left us wanting more, so on and so forth. Right. You said you're like, wouldn't it be great if we had just done more of this here, right? You really want it. And I really respected it and like I cherish the components of let's actually have the experience of it all, right? And I think that especially as leaders, for creating things that most people don't know can even exist. We're leading them to visions that like if they thought it could exist, they would either do it, or if they thought like, or they're like, I don't know how to get there, or like I'm so busy in my world that I can't figure that out or it won't work for me. Like there's all these reasons why like we might show up as not creating the vision that we want. And what I really appreciate about this experience that we're going through, that you let us through, is that it's undeniable that we like what occurred. It's like we started off the experience experiencing the future, experiencing what could be possible. And then the question is not can it be done or not can it not be done? It's really just like how do we continue to expand this? So we did it for 1 minute. Could we do it for two? We had it in this conversation. Could we have it in the next one too? So on and so forth. So I'll love to get your thoughts on this, but I really love this element of like bringing the future into the now. It's one of my favorite things. I say model the future in the present, and I really got a feel of it when you did it here. What are your thoughts, or what are you feeling?
Oh gosh, I appreciate you so much for saying that because it's a great reminder that yes, we are doing it here now. And that's something that I often forget. And I think you kind of calling me out on that wording and that language is so important because we live in a very results oriented world. And so even me, as someone who can guide folks and offer this as an opportunity to invite them to try these types of ideas, I get caught up in the results orientation world too, right? I'm human too, because that's how we've been conditioned. So I think it's really great it was a great opportunity for me to be human while also sharing what I know and what has worked for me with others. And to know that this is, for me, it's been a lifelong process in my adult life. And as leaders, learning is a lifelong process. Becoming our best selves, becoming the best leaders we can be is a lifelong process. And it's not something that's going to happen only in the first minute that we try it. And so I love this idea of repeating, right? So repetition is kind of the thing when you start to enter into what I would call meditation circles, people who meditate often and are in that kind of realm. Repetition is the thing. And also awareness and cultivating a sense of like just being okay who you are right now in this moment is also kind of a thing, right? With the meditation circles. And so it's important to um, allow, like when you said you had all these thoughts coming in your mind, to allow that to be okay. When we are given an opportunity to love ourselves, we just take it. It's like this instant thing. It's the same kind of, mm, I guess you could say, like internal mechanism that we have that keeps us alive. Like when we're in the face of death, like you probably have heard like survival stories with people out in the woods and all the things. And, people are like, well, how did you make it out when your legs were broken and this and that? And you crawled out for 15 miles and blah, blah, blah. And they're like, I just had a will to live. Like I could see my future. I knew I wanted to live and I just kept doing it. And so it's that same thing when we have an opportunity to love ourselves, we just take it instantly, like without even thinking about it. And so I think that's a really wonderful thing to contemplate. So when you talk about opportunities for how do we expand this, sometimes it's just as easy as taking 3 breaths. There was a very well-known meditation teacher whose name I've forgotten, who used to just say, before you do anything, take 3 breaths. Just take 3 breaths. You've gotten into your car, you've hit the ignition switch or turned the key if your car is older. Before you drive out of the driveway or drive off your street, take 3 breaths. Right before we start the podcast, take 3 breaths. Before you go to start your supper in the kitchen, take 3 breaths. And so, just that kind of very small, very instant habit can start to bring about being present, being in the here and now, and then can open that space for exactly what happened with you, which is now you got to see your thoughts, you got to feel your feels, and you got to just be with yourself without needing there to be any change or any need to do something differently. And by being present with ourselves, now we can then become present with others. That helps to influence our leadership, helps to influence how we build our teams, how we engage with customers, prospects, stakeholders of any kind. And it allows us to, like we talked about at the beginning before we hit record, is to allow space and time for the highest good of all to be involved in whatever it is that we're doing or however we're being, right? And to just put out that intention of goodness, the intention of goodwill, the intention of success for everyone involved. It's actually believe it or not, this idea comes from when I was a Rotarian, which a lot of people think is like this crazy conservative, organization, which I guess it is. I don't know. But I was a Rotarian for a while, and my grandparents were Rotarians for many, many years when they ran their business. And there's this thing called the four-way test. And it's like, is it truthful? Is it like honorable? Will it benefit all involved? And then there's like a fourth thing, which I'm not remembering. But that's kind of the idea behind it, right? Is to that whatever it is we're involved in, to put forward that concept of goodwill for everyone involved. But if I got stuff going on in my head and I've got, and I'm like, okay, what's my grocery list for tonight? I got to pick up the kids from daycare and I got to da 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 da. How can I be present to that? Right. So, again, taking 3 breaths, that's a wonderful technique to start expanding this idea. And then, of course, there's apps everywhere for like doing 1 minute of mindfulness and this and this and this. But it's also, I think, making that personal commitment. So you saw the benefits of this, right? I see the benefits of this. So I bring in stillness to, I'm now up to 5 minutes, which it took me 20 years to get to 5 minutes, just saying. Okay. Um, but so I take 5 minutes every day of stillness and I see the benefit. You see the benefit. So now whoever's been listening, if you see the benefit, just make the commitment. Just try it for 1 minute as often as you can. If it's not every day, great, but just try it. Or if you're coming into a team meeting, you're the team leader, walking in, you got everybody there in the conference room, you can see different postures and people and how they feel, and they're like, oh gosh, here we go, team meeting. And then before you begin, just say, hey, everybody, let's just take a deep breath. Let's just collectively gather ourselves here. Let's just be together in this room. Great. Now let's start with our agenda. Here it is on the paper. I mean, how hard is that? Right? And you might get people on your team that are looking at you sideways like, that's new. Like, what's that about? It doesn't have to have any sort of anything, but just you paused. You paused before you started, right? Just that can be a way to expand what we did today. So anyway, those are some ideas to help answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah. As we have our conversation, I'm going to keep staying in the practice, right? And not like I'm going to invite you as you're listening to this here. If this is your first time listening to it, maybe you came back to this again. Like, just check in as you go through. Like, where else can you bring your pause? Where else can you come in? So you asked a question here, Marissa, that I think it's important to presence, right? Which is like, how hard is it? How hard was it to like go in and take the breath? And I can see on someone else's side of it be like, that was really hard, right? Like it's easy for you after 20 years, you can walk in the room and take a breath, but no one's seen me breathe. Definitely not 3 times in a row, or that's not how we do things here. So I want to go back to that element of the courage, right? Because that was the thing that really called me in, which is like you asked for it, you know, and it wasn't, and you claimed it too, right? It wasn't like, hey, is there anything else you need before this? Like, nope. You're like, can I claim this moment real quick here? And I think this is real. I want to speak to this for anyone that wants to take it beyond a personal practice and says, I am a leader. Whether it's by title or by the way that you show up in your spaces, like we lead. And so I feel like you're inviting us to like craft a different space, right? Because it changes. The tone of the entire experience changes with that one breath, with that 1 minute. You've created a different room. This conversation, Marissa, I promise you, was not where I was going to have this conversation go. I didn't even know where it was going, but this was not on the bingo card, you know? Um, and yet it changed, like so much came in with a minute, right? And so I would love to give space to, because I do find it to be really fair to anyone that is not even fair. It's like I just want to see people be able to step into this. So if we can, like, let's speak here about like the courage or
Yeah.
how hard it is, like, and
Mhm.
we may not be able to take it away, but if the very least, if we can just normalize it and like let it be known that like, yeah, it comes with it, I think we will really serve outliers out there. Any thoughts on that? Anything coming to your heart?
Yes. Oh, well, I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you for what you just said because that is a thing. Um, you know, back in the back in the days when I was a youngster in the dinosaur age, we called it peer pressure, right? So this idea that like if you did something different, then you would be ridiculed, you'd be teased, bullied for it, and that sort of thing. And so it does take a tremendous amount of courage. Something that happened to me, we can, which I think might be a good starting point for people, is to not so much push it out into teams or your world or whatever, but to really just focus on yourself first and get your sea legs under you first. So something that happened to me one time, I don't know if I even mentioned this to you, but I used to be a K-12 educator. So I was an educator for 8 years. And the last school I worked at, I was a librarian for a K-12 school. So it was a very small school. I was a librarian for the whole school. And I had the library room open, and I would always try to come early and just set my intention for the day and do my stillness practice and just get ready to prepare for students and colleagues and the whole shebang. So I had the room open, but I would go to this other side around one of the stacks to do my stillness, my meditation, so that people wouldn't see me. Well, one morning, a colleague just walked in on the cell phone, and he wanted like he saw the doors open. He didn't see anybody in there, so he thought this was a place for him to take a personal call or what have you. And so he kind of walks in. He's just super loud and like blah blah blah. And I'm kind of around the corner of the stacks, and I'm actually standing. I was doing a standing meditation there because I was sitting a lot, so I wanted to stand when I meditated. And I was doing my meditation, and he turns and sees me, and he was like, "Oh, and I was like, I'm just doing my meditation." He's like, "Oh, meditating, okay." And he just like runs out the door. And he goes and finishes his phone call someplace else. So he saw me doing what I do, right? And so I have no idea the impact of that for him. Um, but sometimes just seeing when people just see you do what you do, then that starts to get the wheels to spinning and it starts to normalize it just because you are doing it for you. You're not telling them they have to do it. You're not saying we need to all do this. You're not making it a corporate mandate. You're not doing anything like that. You're just, this is working for me. I'm doing it. And you would be surprised, I think, how folks seem to kind of follow that lead. So one of the things I talked about, one of the blog posts I posted when President Carter passed away was this idea of quiet leadership. When we talk about leaders in our world today, it's like the doing, the action, the forming of teams, the this, the that. How about leadership by taking care of myself? How about leadership that's a little bit quieter? I do this thing. Maybe a colleague asks me about it. Oh, I saw that when you came into your office, that you shut the door and you're just sitting at your desk for a short amount of time. Like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm practicing stillness or I'm meditating before I start my day. It just helps me to get grounded and centered. Oh, okay. Well, why do you do that? Well, I find I work better. I'm more productive. I get into the flow of what we're supposed to do. So just by doing, and people will see you, because that's the thing when we're in a work environment, people will see you. And so when you do the thing that works for you, people will see you. And that starts to normalize this behavior. And then it starts to become an open invitation. Well, I do this for me. It really works for me. Would you like to join me in this? Would you like to do this together in our team meeting? And so I appreciate what you said because it does need to be an invitation. I was working with somebody in my spiritual community the other week. She called me for outreach looking for support. And she was talking about a lot of the trauma that she experienced when she was young around things like medical, like if she needed a cavity filled or if she needed glasses or whatever, and how her parents reacted to that. And so I talked about some techniques that I've used to kind of engage with my inner child to help me work through some of these traumatic events. And so she's like, okay, great, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to say this to that inner child. And I was like, okay, let's pause. Let's take a breath. Your inner child, when you were that child, you were abused. And now that inner child is inside you as an adult. And now you're the adult in the room, whereas before it was your parents. So do you want to keep abusing that inner child by forcing them to do this thing? Or would it make your inner child a little more receptive if you invited them and gave them the choice to heal with you or not? And so then I shared some examples about how when I've done this type of inner work, sometimes it takes a couple of weeks and the inner child in me, for whatever that incident was, whatever that situation was, is like, I'm not going to take your hand and go to the park. Like, screw you. I don't trust you. Like, you've been the adult for how many years now? And you only are just noticing me now, you know? And so it's like, I have to honor that because I don't want to keep being abusive to myself, right? So just by showing up for you, doing a practice, finding a method that works for you, that is the quiet leadership. That becomes the invitation without it needing to be anything more forceful. Because as we know, that command and control style has its place for certain things and also needs to be very cautiously used because most of the time when workers experience command and control type management style, their backs are going to go up, right? So how do we influence? How do we engage? How do we, um, you know, get people to do what we want them to do, essentially? And inviting is really one of the best ways. And that's not what most leaders will tell you to be. And yet that seems to be the most effective. So how do we extend that invitation in such a way that we maintain our authority if that's what we're really invested in, and yet it maintains the autonomy and the dignity of the people we're engaging with?
Yeah, Marissa, thanks for this year. There's so let me pause real quick because I don't want to just like move on. Outliers, take that in, let that sink in. Right. One of the things that, as you were saying, and we're going to start wrapping up our conversation here, Marissa, but one of the things that kept washing over me as you were talking was the component of courage, but how do I say it? Almost like relative to who you are being. All right. And so let me just get out of like the high level thing and just say it how it's come to me. But it's like I think about myself and the things that I used to think about that were courageous, like me being able to um, words that would come out of my mouth, me being able to like advocate for myself, request for what I'm looking for, speak honesty, there, speak truth to power, so on and so forth. Even just being willing to be seen, not being like not knowing what's going on or being open to it, right? And eventually, like I was thinking about that as you were saying, you talked about like starting with yourself, and then you also extending it into like an invitation. And my experience of it, as you were talking about, was like, oh yeah, I get that, because at a certain point, like if I need a breath, when I'm good and I do it for me, and I've gone into a place where it's me, it's like this is just who I am now. Like I take breaths, and I may not even recognize that I am actively acting out of courage to go and ask people. Like it's like no, actually, my nervous system is really grounded. I like this is just what I do, and I realize, oh, my nervous system is feeling off. I want to take a breath. Well, there's other people here too. I'll invite them to come take the breath with me. Hey, everyone, let's take the breath. And it's a different, it moves out of the world of like vulnerable courage to like it's just how I am. It just like I wasn't trying to do anything about that. And I think I think it's a cool distinction as you're talking about. I'm like, this is actually and I've done multiple ways where it's like sometimes you do it before it is in you, it's embodied within you. And there's another thing where it's just like I can't be in a space where where this energy is going. And I think that felt like the a natural extension of when I reflect back on how we started our conversation. It was like you knew you enough, going back to self-awareness, you knew you enough, you were practiced this enough, you knew enough to be like, hey, I'm actually starting to like feel less grounded and what we're doing is not supporting like me feeling more grounded. So there's something I do that does make me feel more grounded. So I would love to have this conversation in that from that position. Let's just do that. Are you down for that? And then you invited me into that experience and went, but I don't know how much I like to just like slow down on that because I'm like, I get the sense that that was you, not trying to do any techniques, not trying to do a thing that you heard anywhere, not trying to be, a leader or a yoga practitioner. Just like I like to get back to center, and I've done this enough that I don't mind doing it with you. I don't turn off my video. I don't do it like I'll lead you through it. Do you mind if I lead you through it? Why? Because I know what I want. You know, like you might do some other minute of stillness and take me somewhere else. Like this is what I want. So let's do it. So we're gonna wrap up overall. But how true does that feel to you? What comes up inside you as I bring that up here?
Yeah, I'm just taking a breath and letting that kind of percolate. There's something really, I really hear what you're saying with that. And I do think that there is something very profound about loving ourselves, about supporting ourselves, about caring for ourselves. Self-care is this like kind of cliche word now. Self-care, this and that. But what does that actually look like? What does that mean for me? You and I have talked about this idea of building a business and marketing and all the things and creating my own path for people who want to work with me to be genuinely able to do that. And it's a path that is genuine, it's authentic, and all that kind of thing. So, 1 minute of stillness might not work for everybody. But I think what you are uncovering is this idea that, like, find what does work for you and do that thing. And, like you said, own it so that it becomes integrated into who you are. So, just like how it was very natural for me to say, hey, I really need this, I'd like to invite you in to this experience, it can be just as natural for any of the outliers that are listening to invite others into that experience. There's something very deeply profound about actively demonstrating self-care in your world, your community, your milieu of how you are living your life. It's it's just the same as like when you drop a pebble into a clear pond and those ripples start to go all the way out. People will start to look at you a different way, right? And it's a way to get to know yourself and get to know what's important to you. It's a chance to return to your values, to return to what motivates you for why you are there. I will tell you that um, loving yourself and caring for yourself in this kind of way, it may rock your world. Like the next thing you know, you've quit your job and you've moved to Tahiti and you're doing whatever you're doing. You know what I mean? Like it may completely shift you into a completely different life. And that's okay. And that's part of the path. That's part of what the self-awareness is all about. But it is really important to, again, this stira, the steadfastness, and the sukham, the sweetness and the sweet space. It's really important in, especially like a workplace milieu, that you are demonstrating to others, I take personal responsibility for my well-being. I am not putting that responsibility onto my employer. And also, I am inviting and asking for my employer to provide a positive workspace for me, to be authentic, to be who I really am, right? Because I am absolutely willing to take that personal responsibility for my self love, my self care. And also, I want to be able to show that and demonstrate that in an environment that supports it.
Mhm. Mhm. Marissa, I think we're there. I think we're there for today. I'm grateful. Like I'm grateful for this conversation. And you know, I would ask here if any outlier that's listening to this, and outliers the my ask here is that something really awesome happened in this conversation. And I would love to make sure that the people of your world get a chance to experience it. In my mind, I was almost said get a chance to know about it. But I'm like, that's not it. We're not just talking about things. We are unpacking an actual experience. It happened for 1 minute, but it continued to like have ripples from there, right? And so my ask here is this: like, please go share this episode with people in your world. We grow this podcast just through word of mouth. There's no ads or anything that comes behind it, and it's just like we're out here looking to make sure that outliers know that they're not alone and that like what they have to offer is actually really tremendous. And if you're really up to it, you can join us in the one person, one conversation at a time initiative where you take some time here to think of one person specifically and you share this episode with them and you let them know like this right here, Marissa and Niiamah, we're having an experience and I want you to come be a part of it too. I think this would really like contribute to where you're going. That to me is a deeper impact. And if we do that there, I think it would mean the absolute world to me. I think this is really how we can change people and change the world one person and one conversation at a time. You know? So Marissa, we're now going to come to the conclusion of our conversation. The way that I like to wrap our conversations is to do it with two questions. One, for any outlier that's listening that wants to go deeper down the journey with you, what's the best way for them to do that? All right. And yeah, why don't we start with that?
Sure. The best way is to contact me through my website. It's marissakrupa.com. And I think you can see my name at the bottom of the Zoom screen there. So hopefully that will be still there, and that's how you spell it. And I would be happy to kickstart your journey with you and share what I know to help you on your way.
All right. And any of you that are listening here, it's Krupa. All right. And then Marissa, we'll end the conversation with an insight for you. So outliers, they're taken care of. This is important. We're not like I call it an outside. We're just like here goes what we want to tell outliers. Let's I craft these sessions so that they are actually an experience for the person that's having a conversation as well. And so my I'm curious for you, what insight, if any, did you get from this conversation? What are you taking away from it?
Oh, I love that. And I love that you end all of our conversations with that, Niiamah. So thank
Mhm.
you for being
Mhm.
so aware and so present to ask that question. Gosh, you know, I really took away that we are experiencing this now, that I'm not hoping to offer this to the world, that I am offering this to the world. And that actually gets me choked up. So, thank you. Thank you for that. I am offering this to the world.
Thank you. Thank you for making that offer. Thank you for extending it to us and outliers. And thank you for being with us on this experience. Like it starts with you. And with that, I'm going to end us off here by just inviting you to go out in the world and be you on purpose. Journey on.